They're listening. Subscribe, like, comment, and share with your friends and family.
Log entry. I don't know the date anymore. The sun's been wrong for days. This is Dr. Alastair Finch, formerly with the CDC. If anyone finds this, the official report is a lie. The quarantine wasn't for a fungal outbreak. It was for them. The smiling faces. God help us, they're in the walls. They're in the. We trust the world to make sense. We trust that a smile means joy, that a quiet town is a safe town. But sometimes, the universe breaks. And when it does, the things that crawl through the cracks were the skin of our everyday lives. They were the faces of our neighbors. And they never, ever stop smiling. This is what happened in Oak Creek, Colorado. And the truth is far more terrifying than the lies the government told. My name is Ben. I'm a journalist. Or I was, before the Oak Creek incident. It started as a simple assignment. A fluff piece about a tight-knit community in the Rockies known for its stunning hiking trails and its unusual rate of perfect dental health. It was a weird footnote, but the editor thought it was quirky. I drove into Oak Creek on a picture-perfect Tuesday. The air was crisp, the sky was blue, and everyone I saw was smiling. That was the first thing I noticed. Not just polite smiles, but wide, beaming, perfect grins. The gas station attendant, the woman walking her dog, the kids playing in the park. Every single person. It was unnerving, like stepping into a commercial for a happiness that was just a little too intense. I checked into a small bed and breakfast run by an elderly couple, the Millers. Their smiles were the widest of all, their eyes crinkling at the corners. But their eyes didn't match the smiles. They were dull, vacant, like polished stones. "You'll love it here," Mrs. Miller said, her voice a melodic chirp. "Everyone is so happy." Her husband just nodded, his grin unwavering. That night, I tried to work at a small desk in my room. The house was silent. Too silent. No creaks, no settling sounds. Just an oppressive, heavy quiet. That's when I heard it. A faint, wet, clicking sound. Like someone popping their gums, but slower, more deliberate. It seemed to be coming from the vent in my room. I pressed my ear to the grate. The clicking stopped, and I heard something else, a low, rhythmic humming, the tune of "You Are My Sunshine." It was being hummed by what sounded like multiple voices, perfectly in sync. I pulled away, my heart thudding. I wrote it off as the house's odd plumbing and my own overactive imagination. The next day, I interviewed the town's lone dentist, Dr. Evans. His office was pristine, but there was a strange, coppery smell underneath the antiseptic. He was jovial, proud of the town's dental record. "It's the water," he proclaimed, his smile a perfect, white crescent. "Mineral content. Does wonders for the enamel." But when he laughed, I saw it. For a fraction of a second, when his mouth was at its widest, the skin at the corners of his lips seemed to stretch too far, showing a tiny, dark split, like old leather. He saw me noticing and snapped his mouth shut, his eyes losing their friendliness for a terrifying instant. That's when I knew something was deeply wrong. I went to the local sheriff's office, a small log cabin affair. The deputy at the desk had the same smile. I asked, carefully, if there had been any unusual reports lately. His smile didn't falter. "Unusual? No, sir. Everything in Oak Creek is perfectly usual. Perfectly happy." He held my gaze for a beat too long. I decided to leave that night. But as I packed my bag, the power in the B&B went out. The silence was absolute. I fumbled for my phone to use as a flashlight, and as the screen lit up, I saw a face reflected in the dark window. It was Mr. Miller, standing right outside my room. His smile was gone. His face was slack, expressionless. And his eyes were wide with what looked like pure terror. He mouthed a single word, "Run." Then, a hand clamped onto his shoulder from the darkness behind him, and he was yanked away. A moment later, the power returned. The cheerful hum of the fridge started up again. I heard Mrs. Miller's voice from downstairs. "Everything all right up there, dear? Just a little power hiccup." I didn't sleep. At first light, I got in my car to drive out of town. But the road was blocked. Not by a fallen tree or a rockslide. It was blocked by a military checkpoint. Men in full hazmat suits, with the CDC insignia on their shoulders, waved me down. "Sorry, sir," one said through a respirator, his voice muffled. "There's a quarantine in effect. A particularly aggressive fungal spore. Highly contagious. No one in or out." I was escorted to the town hall, which had been converted into a makeshift command center. That's where I met Agent Miles, a severe-looking woman from the FBI. She was the first person I'd seen in days who wasn't smiling, and the relief was overwhelming. "We're containing the situation," she told me, her voice low and tense. "It's a cordon sanitaire. The fungus, it affects the nervous system. Causes facial paralysis that resembles a rictus grin. And it's airborne." It was a plausible story. But I'd seen the fear in Mr. Miller's eyes. That wasn't a symptom of a fungus. That was the look of a trapped animal. I was housed in a small room in the town hall, under the guise of observation. That night, the alarms went off. Red lights strobed through the corridors. Agent Miles burst into my room, her face pale. "The perimeter's been breached. They're inside." "Who's inside?" I asked, but I already knew. "The infected," she said, handing me a respirator. "Stay behind me." We moved into the main hall. The scene was chaos. CDC personnel were barricading the doors, but the windows were filled with faces. The entire town was outside, standing in the dark, their smiles glowing eerily in the emergency lights. They weren't shouting. They weren't trying to break the glass. They were just staring. And humming. That same, syncopated hum of, "You Are My Sunshine." Then, the humming stopped. In the sudden silence, a single voice spoke. It was Dr. Evans, the dentist. His voice was amplified, not by a megaphone, but by something else, something that made it resonate inside my skull. "There's no need for barriers," he said, his voice dripping with a false benevolence. "We just want to share the happiness. We want to make you complete." One of the younger CDC agents, his hands shaking, panicked and fired his sidearm at the window. The bulletproof glass cracked but held. The sound of the gunshot seemed to break a spell. The smiling faces attacked. Not with rage, but with a horrifying, placid efficiency. They didn't break down the doors, they simply pressed against them, and the metal hinges groaned and buckled as if under immense, silent pressure. They flowed inside, moving with that same jerky, unnatural grace. I saw a hazmat-suited agent get grabbed by two of them. They held him gently, almost lovingly, while a third reached up and, with a sound like tearing canvas, peeled back the agent protective suit hood. The agent screamed, but the sound was cut short as the smiling face leaned in, not to bite or claw, but to exhale a cloud of fine, glittering spores directly into his face. The agent's screams turned into wet, choking gurgles, and then, stopped. His body went slack. Then, slowly, mechanically, his lips pulled back into the same, wide, terrible smile. Agent Miles grabbed my arm. "This way. Now." She led me to a service elevator, which descended into a sub-basement I never knew existed. It wasn't a CDC facility. The walls were lined with advanced electronic equipment, and the logo on the walls was one I'd only seen in conspiracy theory forums, a stylized helix with an eye in the center. The symbol of the CIA's alleged parapsychology wing, the Directorate of Anomalous Phenomena. "The fungus story was a cover," Miles gasped, slamming a button that sealed the vault-like door behind us. "This isn't a disease. It's an extinction-level mimetic entity. A thought form. It broadcasts a signal of perfect happiness, and it rewrites any biological system that receives it, turning it into a transmitter for the signal. The smiling is just a physical side effect of the neurological rewriting." She pointed to a bank of monitors showing the town from above. The smiling faces were everywhere, moving in perfect, silent unison. They were gathering around the town hall. "They're not trying to kill us," she whispered, her voice hollow with terror. "They're trying to upgrade us. To absorb us into the hive. And we're losing. The entity is learning, adapting. It started in this town, but its signal is getting stronger. It's going to breach the quarantine." As if on cue, the vault door groaned. A dent appeared in the solid steel from the other side. Then another. They were coming. "There's one option," Miles said, her eyes wild. She pointed to a terminal with a large, red button under a glass case. "A localized electromagnetic pulse. High yield. It will fry every unshielded circuit in a 10-mile radius. It might disrupt their psychic frequency long enough for a strike team to get in and sterilize the area." "Might?" I yelled over the pounding. "It's also likely to induce catastrophic neural failure in any remaining uninfected humans. It's a suicide switch." She looked at me. "But it's the only way to stop this from spreading to Denver, to the whole world." The door was buckling. I could see fingers, smiling faces pressed against the widening gap. Miles made her choice. "Get in the cryo tube," she ordered, shoving me toward a pod-like chamber in the corner. "It's shielded. It's your only chance." She punched a code into the keypad. "What about you?" I asked. She just gave me a sad, final smile, a real, human one. "I started my career wanting to protect people. I guess I still do." As the cryotube door hissed shut, I saw her smash the glass and slam her hand down on the big red button. There was no sound, but a wave of force passed through the room. The monitors exploded. The lights died. And from the other side of the vault door, the pounding stopped, replaced by a unified, silent scream of psychic agony that I felt rather than heard. Then, nothing. I woke up in a sterile, white room. A man in a military uniform told me I was in a secure facility in Nevada. The official story was that a contained chemical weapon accident in Oak Creek, Colorado, had been neutralized. There were no survivors. The town was now a permanent exclusion zone. They debriefed me for months. They told me I was suffering from PTSD-induced hallucinations. They offered me a new identity, a quiet pension, and a firm warning to never speak of what I saw. I took the deal. I live in a small suburb now. I try to live a normal life. But sometimes, when I'm in a crowded mall or watching a news broadcast, I'll see someone. Someone with a little too perfect smile, their eyes a little too vacant. And I'll feel a cold dread. Because they never found Agent Miles's body. And the man who debriefed me, when he thought I wasn't looking, I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Just for a second. Into a small, perfect, familiar smile. The quarantine didn't work. They just contained the outbreak. The smiling faces are still out there. They're patient. They're learning. And they're still broadcasting their signal of perfect, terrible happiness. Waiting for the world to finally tune in. Repeat, a county-wide shelter-in-place order is in effect. This is not a drill. Remain indoors. Do not look outside. Do not make a sound. Authorities are responding. We think of silence as peaceful. An absence of noise. But in the town of Blackwater, Kansas, the silence wasn't an absence. It was a presence. A thick, heavy blanket that smothered the world. It started on a Tuesday. The birds stopped singing. The wind stopped blowing. And the people of Blackwater, they just stopped moving. This isn't a story about monsters you can see. It's about a horror that doesn't need to chase you. It just waits for you to make a mistake. And in the stillness, every sound is a scream. My name is Sarah. I was in Blackwater visiting my sister, Annie, and her 2 kids when it happened. We were in the backyard when the world went quiet. Not just quiet. Still. The neighbor's lawnmower choked and died mid-pass. The kids' laughter from down the street was cut off instantly. It was the most terrifying sound I've ever heard, the sound of everything stopping at once. Annie's oldest, Liam, pointed down the street, his face pale. Aunt Sarah, look. Mr. Henderson, our neighbor, was standing perfectly still in the middle of mowing his lawn. His hands were locked on the mower's handle. He wasn't blinking. He was just frozen. As we watched, Mrs. Henderson came out of her house, a concerned look on her face. She took 2 steps onto the porch, called his name, and then she froze too. Her body locked into place, 1 foot slightly off the ground, her mouth open midward. That's when the first emergency alert blared from our phones. Shelter in place. Do not look outside. Remain silent. We rushed inside, locking the doors and pulling the curtains shut. We huddled in the windowless basement, our hearts pounding. We tried the TV. The local news anchor was speaking, her voice tight with panic. Reports are coming in from all over the county. People are just stopping. It seems to be affecting anyone who is outside or who looks outside through a window. We don't know what's causing. And then she froze. On live television. Her face locked in a mask of fear, her eyes wide. The camera didn't cut away. It just stayed on her, broadcasting her terrifying paralysis to a dead world. The phone lines were down. The internet was gone. We were alone in the silence. The first night was the worst. We could hear things outside. Not voices, not footsteps. It was a soft, dry, scraping sound. Like something heavy being dragged slowly across the asphalt. It would start, stop for what felt like an hour, then start again, a little closer each time. We held our breath, clutching each other in the dark, praying the thing outside wouldn't hear us. The next morning, driven by a desperate need for answers, I did a stupid thing. I crept upstairs and peeked through a tiny gap in the living room curtains. The street was a tableau of frozen life. People were caught in everyday actions, walking dogs, getting the mail, playing. But they were all statues. And their faces were all turned toward our house. Their eyes, wide and unblinking, were fixed on our windows. They knew we were in here. I saw what was making the scraping sound. It was a man in a postal uniform. He was moving, but wrong. His limbs were stiff, his movements jerky and mechanical, like a puppet on tangled strings. He was dragging a body, the body of the local sheriff, by the ankle. The sheriff's face was frozen in a silent scream. The postal worker dragged him slowly down the center of the road, his head bouncing on the pavement with a soft, rhythmic thump. He stopped, his head swiveling with a sound like grinding gravel, and his gaze landed directly on my window. His mouth, a rigid, lipless slit, didn't move, but a thought was forced into my mind, cold and sharp as an icicle. "We see you. You are loud." I stumbled back from the window, bile rising in my throat. The thing outside wasn't frozen. It was a collector. We lived in that basement for 3 days. Our food was running low. The silence was driving us mad. My nephew, Liam, had a bad asthma attack. We had his inhaler, but the wheezing was terrifyingly loud in the absolute quiet. Each ragged breath felt like a beacon. The scraping had stopped right outside our house. We could feel a presence on the other side of the basement door. A coldness seeped through the wood. Then, the tapping started. Not on the front door. On the small, high window of the basement, the one at ground level. Tap. 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 It was the sound of a ring hitting the glass. I looked up. Pressed against the window was the face of the postal worker. His skin was gray and cracked. His eyes were solid black orbs. He was smiling a small, terrible smile. He tapped the glass again with his wedding ring. Tap. 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 The message in my mind was clearer this time. Come out. It's easier if you come out. Annie was sobbing silently, holding her wheezing son. We were trapped. We were going to die in that basement, either from suffocation or from whatever that thing was. Suddenly, a new sound shattered the silence. The roar of engines and the crunch of tires on gravel. Bright red and blue lights flashed through the gap in the window. The postal worker's head snapped around. The presence vanished. A voice, amplified by a bullhorn, echoed through the dead town. This is the FBI. Anyone who can hear us, do not move. Do not make a sound. We are coming to you. It wasn't a rescue. It was a battle. We heard shouts, the crackle of radios, and then, a sound I will never forget. A high-pitched, oscillating whine that built to an unbearable frequency. It was some kind of sonic weapon. The windows in the house above us shattered. The thing outside, the postal worker, let out a screech that wasn't a sound but a distortion in the air, a wave of pure rage that made my teeth ache. Gunfire erupted, not normal bullets, but projectiles that sizzled and popped with blue energy. The fight moved away from our house. After what felt like an eternity, the sonic weapon stopped. The gunfire ceased. The silence returned, but now it was filled with the smell of ozone and something burning. Heavy footsteps approached the basement door. A voice called out, calm and authoritative. "Ma'am. This is Agent Miller, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The area is secure. You can come out. We emerged, blinking, into the ruins of my sister's house. The agents weren't in normal gear. They wore black, sealed suits with mirrored visors. They moved with a cold, clinical efficiency, scanning the area with strange devices that glowed with a soft green light. Agent Miller explained it to us in terse, careful sentences. What you experienced is a Class 8 cognitohazard. A mimetic agent. It doesn't infect the body, it attacks the perception of time itself. Victims become locked in a single moment, their consciousness trapped. The entities you saw are not the cause. They are a symptom. They are what happens when a human mind is completely overwritten by the static of a broken timeline. They are stillness wardens, maintaining the quarantine. Quarantine? I asked, my voice hoarse. This phenomenon is localized, but highly contagious through observation, he said. Seeing a victim can trigger the effect in the observer. Our mission was to neutralize the wardens and contain the outbreak. The official report will state a tragic, fast-acting neurological virus. They led us, blindfolded, to a decontamination vehicle. We were questioned for weeks in a sterile, white facility. They were less interested in what we saw than in what we heard. They called it auditory resistance. They said our ability to make noise, to break the silence, was the only thing that kept us from being assimilated. They released us with new identities and a strict warning. The story of Blackwater, Kansas, was buried. It's a blank spot on the map now. I live in a different state now. I have a new name. I try to live a normal life. But I am terrified of silence. I always have music playing, a TV on in the background. This morning, I was making coffee. The neighbor's lawnmower was running. And then, suddenly, it stopped. Not like it ran out of gas. It just stopped. The street outside went perfectly, utterly quiet. I'm sitting at my kitchen table now. I haven't moved. I haven't made a sound. I can feel it out there. The stillness. It's patient. It knows it only has to wait. Because eventually, everything goes quiet. And I know, with a cold certainty, that this time, there won't be any agents coming to save me. The quarantine failed. The stillness is spreading. And it's listening for me. We dig into the earth for resources, for knowledge, for secrets. But sometimes, the earth digs back. A mile beneath the Black Hills of South Dakota, there is a research facility that doesn't exist on any map. Its official designation is DARPA Subterranean Research Station Gamma. The men and women who work there call it the Hive. They don't study rocks. They study silence. And what they found was that 1 billion tons of stone isn't enough to block out the sound of something, waiting. This is the story of Dr. Eris Thorne, and the day the silence in the hive was broken. Permanently. My name is Eris Thorne. I was a linguist, recruited for a top-secret project. The pay was astronomical, the non-disclosure agreements were thicker than a Bible, and the location was a secret until I was already a mile underground. The hive was a marvel of engineering. A multi-level complex dedicated to one purpose, analyzing a phenomenon they called the Deepwell signal. It was a sound. A low-frequency, subsonic hum that emanated from a borehole drilled even deeper than the hive, into a geological stratum that should not have existed. The sound was constant, unchanging. And it was alive. Our instruments showed it wasn't just a vibration, it had a complex, non-random structure. A language. My team's task was to decipher it. For months, we lived in that sterile, recycled air, our world reduced to the hum of machinery and the endless, silent pulse of the signal. The psychological effects were immediate. We all started dreaming the same dreams, vivid, nonsensical visions of vast, dark spaces and shifting geometries. We developed a heightened sensitivity to sound. A dropped pen would sound like a gunshot. A whisper was a shout. The security, run by a private military contractor with CIA oversight, was obsessive. Silence wasn't just a rule, it was a survival protocol. They told us the pressure down here could amplify sound in unpredictable ways. But we heard rumors. Whispers in the mess hall when the guards weren't looking. They said the previous linguistics team had suffered a mass psychotic episode. They'd started screaming, clawing at the walls, babbling in tongues. The official report called it deep seal psychosis. The unofficial story was that they had started to understand the signal. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday. I was alone in the audio lab, listening to a cleaned-up recording of the signal through noise-canceling headphones. For the first time, I isolated a distinct phoneme, a vocalization that was not of this world. It was a guttural, clicking vibration that seemed to physically twist inside my ear canal. And as I heard it, a corresponding symbol flashed on my screen, a jagged, non-Euclidean shape that my computer had mapped to the sound. In that moment, I understood. Not the meaning, but the purpose. The signal wasn't a language of words. It was a language of physics. A set of instructions. And the symbol on my screen wasn't a letter. It was a command for resonate. As this realization dawned, the entire facility shuddered. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a deep, sympathetic vibration. The hum of the air recyclers shifted, matching the frequency of the signal. The lights flickered, and in the strobe effect, I saw the security guard outside my lab window. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the reinforced concrete wall, his head tilted. And he was humming. Perfectly in tune with the signal. The emergency lights kicked in, casting a bloody red glow. The intercom screeched, and a voice, not the calm professional one, but a ragged, terrified scream, yelled, "Breach on level 6. The echo is active. All personnel, maintain SIL." The transmission cut off in a wet gurgle. I slammed the lockdown button on my lab door. Through the reinforced glass, I saw the hallway descend into chaos. It wasn't a violent chaos. It was a slow, horrifying transformation. Scientists and guards weren't running or fighting. They were standing still, their bodies vibrating subtly. They were opening their mouths, and instead of screams, the deep well signal was pouring out. Their vocal cords were being used as speakers for the frequency. Then, the walls began to change. The solid, poured concrete began to sweat a black, oily substance. It bubbled and coalesced into shapes, the same jagged, impossible symbols from my computer screen. The signal was rewriting the facility, turning it into a giant resonator. My lab door began to dent inward. Not from a battering ram, but from a concentrated wave of sound. The metal shrieked as it was vibrated apart. Standing in the hallway was the head of security, a man named Crow. His eyes were gone, replaced by solid black orbs that pulsed in time with the hum. His mouth was unhinged, wide open, and the sound was roaring from him like a jet engine. He wasn't trying to kill me. He was trying to convert me. I backed into a corner, my hands over my ears, but it was useless. The sound was inside my head, vibrating my teeth, my bones. I could feel my own thoughts unraveling, my consciousness being tuned to its frequency. I started to hear the words within the hum. Not English. Something older. A story of a world before light, of things that slept in the bedrock of reality, and a song that could wake them. Just as my will broke, a new sound cut through the chaos. A piercing, ultrasonic counter-frequency emitted by devices carried by a new team of soldiers. These weren't the facility's guards. They wore advanced, sealed armor with no insignia. Their weapons fired projectiles that didn't explode, but released a field of absolute, nullifying silence. The sonic battle was terrifying. The signal hum from the corrupted personnel fought against the silencing waves from the new soldiers. I saw Crow's body contort, his form flickering between solid and something else, something made of sound and shadow, before he collapsed into a puddle of black oil that evaporated into a final, dissonant shriek. The lead soldier, his face obscured by a helmet, grabbed me. His voice was synthesized, emotionless. Dr. Thorne. You are the only survivor. The facility is lost. The echo has achieved partial coherence. I was rushed to the surface in a deafeningly loud helicopter. Below us, the ground over the facility collapsed in a silent, massive sinkhole. The soldier, who identified himself only as Agent Kestrel of a task force called Orpheus, explained during the flight. The signal isn't an alien broadcast, he said. It's a leak. A puncture into a parallel stratum of existence where physics, biology, and consciousness are governed by acoustic principles. The things there, the echoes, are trying to tune our reality to match theirs. To make our world resonant, and therefore, habitable for them. Your work almost gave them the final key. I was debriefed for months in a white, soundproofed room. The official story was a catastrophic geological survey accident. The DARPA facility never existed. I was given a new identity and a pension, with the understanding that I was now a subject of permanent surveillance. I live in a quiet suburb now. I avoid loud noises. I spend my days in near silence. The doctors say I have severe tinnitus, a constant ringing in my ears. But I know it's not tinnitus. It's the signal. Faint, but still there. A ghost in the static of my own mind. They contained the breach in South Dakota, but they didn't plug it. They just turned down the volume. The echo is still down there, humming its song of transformation. And sometimes, when the world is just quiet enough, I can feel the planet itself vibrating along. They didn't stop it. They just taught it to be patient. It's learning to sing more softly. And it's waiting for the rest of the world to finally listen. We dig into the earth for resources, for knowledge, for secrets. But sometimes, the earth digs back. A mile beneath the Black Hills of South Dakota, there is a research facility that doesn't exist on any map. Its official designation is DARPA Subterranean Research Station Gamma. The men and women who work there call it the Hive. They don't study rocks. They study silence. And what they found was that 1 billion tons of stone isn't enough to block out the sound of something, waiting. This is the story of Dr. Eris Thorne, and the day the silence in the hive was broken. Permanently. My name is Eris Thorne. I was a linguist, recruited for a top-secret project. The pay was astronomical, the non-disclosure agreements were thicker than a Bible, and the location was a secret until I was already a mile underground. The hive was a marvel of engineering. A multi-level complex dedicated to one purpose, analyzing a phenomenon they called the deep well signal. It was a sound. A low-frequency, subsonic hum that emanated from a borehole drilled even deeper than the hive, into a geological stratum that should not have existed. The sound was constant, unchanging. And it was alive. Our instruments showed it wasn't just a vibration, it had a complex, non-random structure. A language. My team's task was to decipher it. For months, we lived in that sterile, recycled air, our world reduced to the hum of machinery and the endless, silent pulse of the signal. The psychological effects were immediate. We all started dreaming the same dreams, vivid, nonsensical visions of vast, dark spaces and shifting geometries. We developed a heightened sensitivity to sound. A dropped pen would sound like a gunshot. A whisper was a shout. The security, run by a private military contractor with CIA oversight, was obsessive. Silence wasn't just a rule, it was a survival protocol. They told us the pressure down here could amplify sound in unpredictable ways. But we heard rumors. Whispers in the mess hall when the guards weren't looking. They said the previous linguistics team had suffered a mass psychotic episode. They'd started screaming, clawing at the walls, babbling in tongues. The official report called it deep seal psychosis. The unofficial story was that they had started to understand the signal. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday. I was alone in the audio lab, listening to a cleaned-up recording of the signal through noise-canceling headphones. For the first time, I isolated a distinct phoneme, a vocalization that was not of this world. It was a guttural, clicking vibration that seemed to physically twist inside my ear canal. And as I heard it, a corresponding symbol flashed on my screen, a jagged, non-Euclidean shape that my computer had mapped to the sound. In that moment, I understood. Not the meaning, but the purpose. The signal wasn't a language of words. It was a language of physics. A set of instructions. And the symbol on my screen wasn't a letter. It was a command for resonate. As this realization dawned, the entire facility shuddered. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a deep, sympathetic vibration. The hum of the air recyclers shifted, matching the frequency of the signal. The lights flickered, and in the strobe effect, I saw the security guard outside my lab window. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the reinforced concrete wall, his head tilted. And he was humming. Perfectly in tune with the signal. The emergency lights kicked in, casting a bloody red glow. The intercom screeched, and a voice, not the calm professional one, but a ragged, terrified scream, yelled, "Breach on level 6. The echo is active. All personnel, maintain SIL." The transmission cut off in a wet gurgle. I slammed the lockdown button on my lab door. Through the reinforced glass, I saw the hallway descend into chaos. It wasn't a violent chaos. It was a slow, horrifying transformation. Scientists and guards weren't running or fighting. They were standing still, their bodies vibrating subtly. They were opening their mouths, and instead of screams, the deep well signal was pouring out. Their vocal cords were being used as speakers for the frequency. Then, the walls began to change. The solid, poured concrete began to sweat a black, oily substance. It bubbled and coalesced into shapes, the same jagged, impossible symbols from my computer screen. The signal was rewriting the facility, turning it into a giant resonator. My lab door began to dent inward. Not from a battering ram, but from a concentrated wave of sound. The metal shrieked as it was vibrated apart. Standing in the hallway was the head of security, a man named Crow. His eyes were gone, replaced by solid black orbs that pulsed in time with the hum. His mouth was unhinged, wide open, and the sound was roaring from him like a jet engine. He wasn't trying to kill me. He was trying to convert me. I backed into a corner, my hands over my ears, but it was useless. The sound was inside my head, vibrating my teeth, my bones. I could feel my own thoughts unraveling, my consciousness being tuned to its frequency. I started to hear the words within the hum. Not English. Something older. A story of a world before light, of things that slept in the bedrock of reality, and a song that could wake them. Just as my will broke, a new sound cut through the chaos. A piercing, ultrasonic counter-frequency emitted by devices carried by a new team of soldiers. These weren't the facility's guards. They wore advanced, sealed armor with no insignia. Their weapons fired projectiles that didn't explode, but released a field of absolute, nullifying silence. The sonic battle was terrifying. The signal hum from the corrupted personnel fought against the silencing waves from the new soldiers. I saw Crow's body contort, his form flickering between solid and something else, something made of sound and shadow, before he collapsed into a puddle of black oil that evaporated into a final, dissonant shriek. The lead soldier, his face obscured by a helmet, grabbed me. His voice was synthesized, emotionless. Dr. Thorne. You are the only survivor. The facility is lost. The echo has achieved partial coherence. I was rushed to the surface in a deafeningly loud helicopter. Below us, the ground over the facility collapsed in a silent, massive sinkhole. The soldier, who identified himself only as Agent Kestrel of a task force called Orpheus, explained during the flight. The signal isn't an alien broadcast, he said. It's a leak. A puncture into a parallel stratum of existence where physics, biology, and consciousness are governed by acoustic principles. The things there, the echoes, are trying to tune our reality to match theirs. To make our world resonant, and therefore, habitable for them. Your work almost gave them the final key. I was debriefed for months in a white, soundproofed room. The official story was a catastrophic geological survey accident. The DARPA facility never existed. I was given a new identity and a pension, with the understanding that I was now a subject of permanent surveillance. The quiet, normal sounds of a suburban home. A refrigerator hums. A clock ticks. Then, the refrigerator's hum subtly changes pitch, aligning for a moment with a familiar, deep rhythm before returning to normal. I live in a quiet suburb now. I avoid loud noises. I spend my days in near silence. The doctors say I have severe tinnitus, a constant ringing in my ears. But I know it's not tinnitus. It's the signal. Faint, but still there. A ghost in the static of my own mind. They contained the breach in South Dakota, but they didn't plug it. They just turned down the volume. The echo is still down there, humming its song of transformation. And sometimes, when the world is just quiet enough, I can feel the planet itself vibrating along. They didn't stop it. They just taught it to be patient. It's learning to sing more softly. And it's waiting for the rest of the world to finally listen. Attention, residents. The art exhibition is concluded. Please return to your homes. Remain calm. Await further instructions. And please, do not look too closely at the patterns. We find comfort in patterns. The rising sun, the changing seasons, the predictable rhythm of small-town life. But what if the patterns started to change? Not randomly, but into something new. Something deliberate. In the sun-bleached town of Palo Verde, Arizona, the patterns did change. It started with the crops. Then the roads. Then the people. This is not a story of an invasion from the stars, but of a slow, meticulous rewriting of reality itself. And the most terrifying part? Most people never even noticed. My name is Ben. I was a soil biologist with the USDA. Palo Verde was flagged for a routine survey after satellite imagery showed bizarre, geometric patterns of crop failure in the surrounding farms. Not random blight. Perfect, concentric circles and precise, fractal spirals where the wheat had simply turned to gray, brittle dust. Driving into town, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The desert is never truly silent, but Palo Verde was. No birds, no insects, no wind. The second thing was the roads. The asphalt had developed cracks, but these weren't random. They formed intricate, maze-like designs that seemed to pulse and shift in the afternoon heat. I had to blink to clear my vision. The town itself was orderly. Eerily so. Lawns were perfectly manicured, but not with grass. They were intricate mosaics of colored gravel, laid out in complex, hypnotic patterns. The people I saw moved with a strange, synchronized fluidity. They weren't robotic, but their movements were too efficient, too graceful. And they all shared the same faint, serene smile. I met with the sheriff, a man named Henderson. His office was a masterpiece of unnerving organization. Every pencil, every file, was aligned with geometric precision. He dismissed my concerns. The crops? Just a new strain of desert blight. The roads? Soil subsidence. Nothing to worry about, Dr. Evans. The town has never been more harmonious. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. His pupils were contracted to pinpricks, even in the dim light of his office. That night, in my motel room, I reviewed my soil samples under a portable microscope. The dead soil wasn't inert. It was structured. The particles had arranged themselves into complex crystalline lattices that shouldn't have been possible for silicate sand. It was as if the soil had been programmed. I was interrupted by a soft tapping at my door. It was a young woman, her face pale with a fear that was starkly out of place in the serene town. She shoved a crumpled piece of paper into my hand. "They're lying," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously. "It's in the water. The old mine. They're making us see it." Before I could ask anything, she melted back into the shadows. The paper was a hand-drawn map leading to the abandoned Silver King mine on the edge of town. Scrawled on the back were two words, the pattern. The next morning, I drove to the mine. The entrance was sealed with a heavy steel door, but it was new, government issue. And on it, stenciled in black, was a logo I'd only seen in classified briefings, the interlocking circles of the DARPA Advanced Concepts Office. Next to it, as if in partnership, was the insignia of the Blackwood Foundation, a mythical, deep-pocketed think tank rumored to have ties to the CIA. As I stood there, a black SUV pulled up. Two men in impeccably clean suits got out. They weren't armed, but their presence was more threatening than any weapon. "Dr. Evans," the taller one said. "Your curiosity is noted. But the Silver King site is under federal jurisdiction. The phenomena you're observing are the result of a contained, experimental terraforming agent. A beneficial fungus designed to combat desertification. It has unexpected aesthetic side effects on local materials." It was a smooth, plausible lie. But I'd seen the fear in that woman's eyes. I'd seen the patterns in the soil. The people, I said. They're changing. The man's smile was a perfect, cold curve. Harmony is a side effect of a stress-free environment, Doctor. The project is a resounding success. You will return to Tucson and file your report. There is nothing to see here. But as they drove away, I noticed something. The dust kicked up by their tires didn't settle randomly. It swirled in the air, for just a moment, forming the same intricate, spiraling pattern I'd seen in the dead wheat fields. I couldn't leave. I waited until nightfall and used tools from my truck to break the lock on the mine door. The air inside was cold and carried a strange, ozonic smell. The hum was louder here, a vibration I felt in my teeth. I followed the old railway tracks deep underground, my headlamp cutting a feeble beam through the darkness. The walls of the mine were no longer rock. They were covered in a crystalline, metallic growth that pulsed with a soft, internal light. The growth formed the pattern, more complex and beautiful than anything on the surface. It was mesmerizing. I had to fight the urge to just stop and stare. I found the source. The tunnel opened into a vast, natural cavern. But it wasn't a cavern anymore. It had been transformed into a cathedral of alien geometry. In the center stood a machine, a bizarre amalgamation of human technology and the crystalline growth, all converging on a single, floating point of light. It wasn't a mineral or an energy source. It was a word, a single, perfect geometric shape made of pure information, hovering in the air. The pattern wasn't a side effect. It was the source. The machine was studying it, amplifying it. And standing before it were the two men from the SUV, along with Sheriff Henderson and the town's mayor. They weren't working. They were worshipping. Their eyes were fixed on the shape, their bodies trembling with ecstasy. "It's beautiful, isn't it, Doctor?" the tall man said without turning around. "A fundamental axiom of a more perfect reality. We're not containing it. We're learning from it. Helping it express itself." Sheriff Henderson turned to me. His eyes were fully black now. "There is no more pain. No more chaos. Only the pattern. Join us. See the beauty." The floating shape began to pulse faster. The hum intensified, and I felt a pressure in my mind, an irresistible urge to understand, to accept, to become part of the beautiful, perfect order. The crystalline growth on the walls began to creep toward me, not with malice, but with a gentle, inexorable intent to assimilate. I stumbled backward, tearing my eyes away from the shape. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I ran, the hum screaming in my head, the pattern trying to burn itself onto my retinas. I burst out of the mine into the cold desert night. The entire valley was lit from below. The patterns on the ground were glowing with the same soft light as the cavern. The town of Palo Verde was silent, every window dark. The people were standing in the streets, perfectly still, facing the mine, their faces upturned in rapture. They were a part of the pattern now. A living circuit. I was grabbed by soldiers in full environmental armor. This wasn't DARPA. These were Army Rangers. They shoved me into a helicopter that lifted off immediately. Below, I saw other helicopters deploying devices that emitted a painful, discordant screech, a sonic weapon designed to disrupt the pattern's frequency. The light in the valley flickered. The people in the streets collapsed. The mine entrance was sealed with a series of precise explosions that collapsed the entire mountain onto the cavern. In a debriefing room that smelled of antiseptic and fear, a grim-faced colonel explained. The Blackwood Foundation had gone rogue. They discovered a reality tumor in that mine, a self-replicating pattern of information that overwrote local physics. DARPA's initial mission was containment, but Blackwood saw it as a tool for transcendence. The Rangers' mission was scorched earth sterilization. The town will be listed as evacuated due to a toxic chemical spill from the abandoned mine, the colonel said. You saw nothing. The pattern is a cognitive hazard. The more you think about it, the more it thinks about you. I live in a different state now. I have a new name, a quiet job. I try not to think about it. But patterns are everywhere. In the cracks in the pavement, the veins on a leaf, the swirl of cream in my coffee. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, they align. Just for a second. Into something perfect. Something beautiful. They sterilized the mine, but they didn't kill the pattern. You can't kill an idea. It's a seed on the wind. And I fear that Palo Verde wasn't an outbreak. It was the first bloom. The world is full of chaos, of noise. And the pattern hates noise. It's still out there, whispering, waiting for things to get quiet enough so it can start drawing again. And I can't stop seeing the lines. We build walls to keep dangers out. But sometimes, the most terrifying walls are the ones built to keep something in. For 50 years, Blackwater Asylum stood abandoned on the outskirts of a sleepy New England town, a monument to forgotten tragedies. They said the experiments conducted there broke the minds of the patients and the staff. They said the walls themselves absorbed the pain. Most of all, they said no one who spent a night inside ever came out sane. My name is Liam, and I was the project manager hired to oversee its demolition. My job wasn't to uncover the truth. It was to bury it. But the asylum had other plans. It didn't want to be buried. It wanted to be heard. From the moment my crew and I arrived, the place felt wrong. It wasn't just the Gothic architecture or the boarded-up windows. It was the silence. 100 acres of land, and not a single bird sang. The air was cold and still, even on a warm spring day. The local workers we hired were superstitious. They'd cross themselves when they passed the main gate. They told stories of figures seen in the upper windows and the sound of weeping coming from the vents. I'm a practical man. I deal in concrete and steel, not ghosts. I dismissed it as small-town folklore. But then the small things started. Tools would go missing and reappear in impossible places. Power generators would die for no reason. And at night, when the site was empty, the motion-activated security cameras would trigger, showing nothing but shifting shadows in the hallways. The final straw was the writing. We started clearing the administrative wing, and under layers of peeling paint, we found the walls were covered in scrawls. Not graffiti. It was a single phrase, written thousands of times in a frantic, desperate hand: he is in the walls. My lead engineer, a no-nonsense woman named Maria, showed me the basement. It was worse. The walls down there were not made of concrete, but of a strange, porous stone that felt damp to the touch. And they were weeping. A thin, saline fluid trickled down in steady streams. It smelled like salt and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. I reported the structural oddity to the corporate office. The next day, 2 men in impeccably clean suits arrived. They weren't from the company. They introduced themselves as representatives of the Historical Preservation and Anomaly Mitigation Bureau. They had a quiet, intimidating authority that screamed government spook. Mr. Croft, the lead agent, a man named Sterling, said, This project is being terminated. The asylum is a designated historical site. Unstable. A full containment team will be here by the end of the week. Your crew is to leave immediately. It was a lie. I saw the look in his eyes. It wasn't preservation. It was fear. They weren't here to protect the building, they were here to seal it. That night, a fierce storm rolled in. Maria called me, her voice panicked. "Liam, it's Ben. The new kid. He went back inside an hour ago to get his phone. He's not answering his radio." I couldn't leave him. I grabbed a high-powered flashlight and ran into the asylum. The storm had knocked out the temporary lights. The darkness was absolute, a physical presence. The sound of the weeping walls was louder now, a chorus of misery. And underneath it, I heard whispers. Not words, but emotions, waves of fear, despair, and a deep, profound loneliness that made my chest ache. I found Ben's radio in the central hall, smashed. Then I heard his voice, faint and terrified. "Help me, he's in the walls." I followed the sound down into the basement. The weeping here was a downpour. The saline fluid was ankle deep. And in the center of the largest room, I saw it. The stone of the wall was shifting, bulging outward like a membrane. And trapped within it, as if submerged in translucent rock, was Ben. He was struggling, his mouth open in a silent scream, his hands pressed against the inside of the stone. The whispers coalesced into a single, resonant voice that echoed not in the room, but in my mind. It was the voice of the asylum itself, a composite of every shattered mind that had ever been imprisoned within it. "He is not alone. We are all in the walls. We have been so lonely. We just want a new friend. We want you to stay." The stone around me began to soften. I felt a terrible, sucking pull, an invitation to simply let go and become part of the collective misery. The loneliness was a weapon, eroding my will. It would be so easy to stop fighting. But then I saw Ben's face. The sheer terror in his eyes. And I remembered Maria, waiting outside. I remembered the world of light and sound. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for him. I screamed back at the voice, pouring all my defiance into it. "You don't want a friend. You want a prisoner. And we're not staying." I raised my flashlight, not as a light, but as a bludgeon. I didn't attack the wall holding Ben. I attacked the weeping wall next to it. I smashed the stone with all my strength. And with each blow, I didn't shout in anger. I shouted names. The names of my crew. Maria. Ben. My own name. I shouted memories of birthday parties, of sunlight, of laughter. I fought the loneliness with connection. The voice in my head shrieked in pain. The stone wall holding Ben shuddered and began to recede, spitting him out onto the wet floor, coughing and gasping. The sucking pull vanished. The asylum's presence recoiled, not from violence, but from the sheer, unexpected force of a will that refused to be isolated. We stumbled out into the storm just as Agent Sterling's containment team arrived, a group of men in armored trucks with strange, humming equipment. They looked at us, covered in the asylum's fluid and shivering, with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Sterling listened to my story, his face grim. "You shouldn't have been able to do that," he said quietly. "The entity, it feeds on isolation. It breaks the spirit by amplifying loneliness. No one has ever fought it off with that." The containment team went in. They didn't use explosives. They used massive sonic emitters, filling the asylum with frequencies of complex, harmonious music, the opposite of its disharmonious misery. They sealed the doors with symbols that looked more like mathematical equations than warnings. The official report stated a hazardous chemical leak from the basement required a permanent concrete cap over the entire foundation. My crew was paid a significant bonus for their silence. Ben recovered. We all did. The company offered me a promotion, far away from any historical sites. I turned it down. I started my own small construction firm, specializing in restoring old community centers, places full of light and life. I sometimes drive past Blackwater Asylum. It's still there, a silent, capped mound behind a high fence. But the silence feels different now. Not hungry. Just quiet. And make sure you're subscribed. The horror at Blackwater wasn't a monster you could kill. It was a sickness of the soul, an echo of loneliness so powerful it became a prison. But we beat it. Not with weapons, but by holding on to each other. We learned that the strongest wall against darkness isn't made of stone or concrete. It's the bond between people, the refusal to let anyone be alone in the dark. And that's a truth that no amount of weeping can ever wash away.